The Australian penny holds a very special place in the history of Australia's currency, and among all the dates ever minted, the 1941 and 1964 Australian penny stand out as two of the most discussed, collected, and searched coins by numismatists and coin lovers around the world. When we talk about the Australian penny, we are not just talking about a small bronze coin, but a powerful symbol of Australia's economic growth, wartime struggles, post-war development, and cultural identity. The penny was first introduced in Australia in 1911 after the country shifted from British currency to its own national coinage, and for more than 50 years it remained an essential part of daily life. Every shopkeeper, every child, and every household handled these pennies, often without realizing that decades later some of these coins would become highly valuable collector's items. The 1941 Australian penny was minted during one of the most critical periods in world history, the Second World War. Australia was deeply involved in the war effort, and resources like copper and bronze were in high demand for military equipment, ammunition, and industrial use. Because of this, coin production during wartime was challenging, and mints had to work under pressure, sometimes using recycled metals and operating with limited resources. The 1941 penny features a portrait of King George VI on the obverse, designed by Thomas Humphrey Paget, showing the king facing left with dignified and modest expression, symbolizing leadership during a time of global uncertainty. On the reverse side, the iconic kangaroo design appears, created by George Kruger Gray, representing strength, resilience, and the unique wildlife of Australia. This design became one of the most recognizable images in Australian coinage history. What makes the 1941 penny particularly interesting is the variety of minting qualities found today. Some coins were struck sharply, while others show weak details due to worn dies and hurried production. Collectors carefully examine features such as a kangaroo's fur, the clarity of the lettering, and the smoothness of the rim to determine authenticity and grade. In circulated condition, the 1941 penny may appear common, but in high-grade condition, especially uncirculated examples, its value can increase significantly. Some rare varieties, including pennies with specific die cracks or unusual toning, have attracted serious attention at auctions. Moving forward to the 1964 Australian penny, we enter a completely different era in the nation's history. By 1964, Australia was experiencing economic growth, industrial expansion, and modernization. The penny was nearing the end of its long journey, as the country was preparing to adopt decimal currency in 1966. This makes the 1964 penny one of the final pennies ever produced for circulation, adding to its historical importance. The obverse of the 1964 penny features Queen Elizabeth II, designed by Mary Gillick, showing a young queen with a laurel wreath in her hair, symbolizing renewal, continuity, and stability. This portrait is highly admired by collectors for its elegance and detail. The reverse continues the traditional kangaroo design, maintaining a visual connection between generations of Australian coinage. Although the 1964 penny had a relatively high mintage compared to earlier years, its significance lies in its position as one of the last pennies used by Australians before the decimal transition. Many people still remember using these coins in shops, schools, and public transport, making it a deeply nostalgic piece of history. From a collector's perspective, the value of a 1964 penny depends greatly on condition. While circulated examples are widely available, coins in brilliant uncirculated condition, with original red or red-brown luster, can command much higher prices. Pennies that have been well preserved, free from corrosion, heavy scratches, or cleaning marks, are especially desirable. When comparing the 1941 and 1964 Australian pennies, collectors often appreciate how these two coins represent completely different chapters of Australia's story, one shaped by war and survival, and the other by growth and transition. Together, they show how even the smallest denomination of currency can reflect major national events. Today, Australian pennies are no longer legal tender, but their legacy lives on through collectors, historians, and enthusiasts who continue to study, buy, sell, and preserve them. Coin grading plays a crucial role in determining their market value, with professional grading services evaluating factors such as strike quality, surface preservation, luster, and eye appeal. Many collectors search old collections, inherited boxes, and flea markets hoping to discover a rare high-grade example. Stories of valuable finds keep the excitement alive and inspire new generations to take an interest in numismatics. The Australian penny, especially the 1941 and 1964 issues, reminds us that history does not only exist in books and museums, but also in everyday objects that pass through countless hands. Each coin carries marks of its journey, from minting presses to wartime pockets, from post-war shopping counters to modern collectors' albums. Whether you are a serious collector or someone who simply enjoys learning about history, these pennies offer a fascinating glimpse into Australia's past, making them far more than just old copper coins. They are timeless witnesses to the nation's evolving story. The Australian penny of 1941 is more than just a small bronze coin. It is a powerful historical artifact that reflects one of the most intense and uncertain periods in Australia's national story. Issued during the height of the Second World War, this coin circulated at a time when the world was gripped by conflict, economies were under extreme pressure, and everyday life was shaped by rationing, military service, and global uncertainty. When Australians held a 1941 penny in their hands, they were holding a piece of a nation at war, a country balancing survival, duty, and resilience. Today, collectors view this coin not only for its monetary value, but also for the remarkable story it carries from a defining moment in history. By 1941, Australia was fully committed to the war effort, supporting Britain and the Allied forces across multiple fronts. The country's industries were redirected toward military production, manpower was stretched thin, and resources such as metals were in constant demand. Despite these pressures, the Royal Australian Mint continued to produce essential coinage to keep the domestic economy functioning. The penny remained a vital unit of everyday trade, used by families for basic goods, transport, and daily necessities. The decision to continue minting pennies during wartime highlights how important stable currency was for maintaining morale and economic order during such turbulent times. The 1941 Australian penny features a familiar portrait of King George VI on the obverse, a symbol of continuity and authority during a period of global chaos. George VI, who had ascended the throne after the abdication of his brother Edward VIII, became a unifying figure during the war years. His image on the coin served as a reminder of Australia's connection to the British Commonwealth and its shared struggle against the Axis powers. The portrait is surrounded by the Latin inscription Georgiv 6D, G, BR, OMNREX, which translates to George VI by the grace of God, King of all the Britons. This inscription reflects the traditional style of British imperial coinage, still used in Australia at the time. The reverse of the 1941 penny carries the iconic kangaroo design, created by George Kruger Gray, which had become a defining feature of Australian bronze coinage. The kangaroo, standing proudly on a grassy mound, represents Australia's unique identity, strength, and independence. Even during a time when the country was deeply tied to Britain through war and governance, the presence of the kangaroo reminded citizens of their distinct national character. Below the kangaroo, the denomination 1 penny is clearly displayed, with the date 1941 beneath it. The clean and bold design made the coin easy to recognize in circulation, an important feature during a time when efficiency and clarity mattered greatly. The metal composition of the 1941 Australian penny is bronze, consisting primarily of copper with small amounts of tin and zinc. This composition had been standard for Australian pennies for decades, but during wartime, copper was a strategically important material used in ammunition, wiring, and military equipment. Despite this, bronze pennies continued to be produced, although the government remained cautious about metal usage. This adds another layer of historical significance to the coin, as it represents a balance between military necessity and civilian life. Several mints were involved in the production of Australian pennies during this era, including the Melbourne, Sydney, and Perth mints, as well as overseas facilities, such as the Bombay Mint in India. In 1941, a significant number of pennies were struck in Australia, but some varieties can be identified by subtle differences in strike quality, rim thickness, and lettering. These variations are of great interest to collectors today, as they help determine where a coin was minted and how rare a specific example might be. In terms of mintage, the 1941 Australian penny was produced in relatively large numbers compared to some other wartime issues, as the demand for small change remained high. However, survival rates in high condition are much lower. Most pennies from this period saw a heavy circulation, resulting in worn details, smooth surfaces, and weakened inscriptions. Finding a 1941 penny in uncirculated or near-mint condition is increasingly difficult, which significantly increases its desirability among collectors. Condition plays a crucial role in determining the value of a 1941 Australian penny. Coins in heavily worn condition are generally affordable and commonly found, making them popular among beginner collectors or those interested in historical sets. However, examples with strong detail, sharp lettering, and minimal work can command much higher prices. Pennies that retain original luster, clean surfaces, and well-defined features are especially prized. Professional grading services often assign grades such as fine, very fine, extremely fine, or uncirculated, each level representing a significant jump in value. One of the most fascinating aspects of the 1941 penny is the presence of errors and varieties. During wartime, minting conditions were not always ideal, and this occasionally resulted in mistakes such as off-center strikes, die cracks, double lettering, or planchet flaws. These error coins are rare and highly collectible, often selling for many times the value of a standard example. Collectors actively search for these anomalies, as they offer a unique glimpse into the minting process under wartime pressure. The historical context of 1941 adds emotional and cultural value to the coin. This was the year when the war expanded into the Pacific, and Australia faced direct threats closer to home. The fear of invasion, the mobilization of troops, and the sacrifices made by civilians all form part of the backdrop against which this penny circulated. For many Australians, coins like the 1941 penny would have passed to the hands of soldiers, factory workers, shopkeepers, and families trying to maintain normal life under extraordinary circumstances. Today, the 1941 Australian penny is a favorite among collectors of Commonwealth and wartime coinage. It appeals not only to numismatists but also to historians and enthusiasts who appreciate tangible connections to the past. Holding this coin is like holding a silent witness to history, a small object that survived bombings, rationing, and global upheaval to reach the present day. Collectors often seek the 1941 penny as part of a complete George VI penny set or a World War II-era collection. Its combination of historical significance, attractive design, and accessibility makes it an ideal piece for both new and experienced collectors. While it may not always reach the extreme prices of some rare Australian coins, its value lies in its story as much as in its market price. In conclusion, the Australian penny of 1941 stands as a remarkable symbol of endurance, identity, and history. It represents a nation at war, a people adapting to hardship, and a currency that continued to serve everyday life during one of the darkest chapters of the 20th century. Whether you are a collector, a history enthusiast, or someone discovering Australian coinage for the first time, the 1941 penny offers a deep and meaningful connection to the past. Its modest size hides an extraordinary story, making it one of the most fascinating pennies in Australia's numismatic legacy. The Australian penny of 1964 represents the closing chapter of a long and meaningful era in Australia's monetary history, an era when bronze pennies were a daily part of life and symbolized a nation still closely tied to its British heritage. By the mid-1960s, Australia was standing on the edge of major economic change, with decimal currency just around the corner, and the 1964 penny emerged as one of the final issues before this transformation reshaped how Australians handle money forever. Although it may appear simple at first glance, the 1964 penny carries deep historical importance, cultural identity, and numismatic interest that continues to attract collectors across Australia and around the world today. In 1964, Australia was still using the pre-decimal currency system inherited from Britain, where £1 equaled 20 shillings and each shilling equaled 12 pence. The penny was the smallest unit in everyday circulation and was widely used for basic purchases, such as newspapers, sweets, bus fares, and small household items. For millions of Australians, the penny was a familiar object, passed from hand to hand without much thought. Yet today it stands as a reminder of a completely different economic system. The 1964 penny was struck during a time of social change, modernization, and growing national confidence, just 2 years before decimalization arrived in 1966. The obverse of the 1964 Australian penny features the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, designed by British sculptor Mary Gillick. This youthful portrait shows the Queen facing right, wearing a laurel wreath, symbolizing continuity and royal tradition. Surrounding the portrait is the inscription, Elizabeth II Queen, reflecting Australia's status as a constitutional monarchy and its enduring connection to the British Crown. This design was used on Australian pennies throughout much of Elizabeth II's early reign, and is now widely appreciated for its clean lines and dignified simplicity. On the reverse side of the coin appears one of the most iconic symbols in Australian numismatics, the kangaroo. Designed by George Kruger Gray, the kangaroo stands proudly facing right, with the word Australia above and the date 1964 below. The kangaroo design had been used on Australian pennies since 1911 and became a powerful national emblem, representing strength, resilience, and the unique wildlife of the continent. By 1964, this design had already become deeply ingrained in Australian identity, making the penny instantly recognizable to anyone who lived through that era. The 1964 penny was minted at the Royal Australian Mint in Melbourne, as Australia's own minting operations were still developing before the opening of the Canberra Mint in 1965. It was struck in bronze, composed primarily of copper, with smaller amounts of tin and zinc. The coin measures approximately 30.8 millimeters in diameter and weighs about 9.45 grams, giving it a solid, substantial feel compared to modern coins. The bronze composition gives the coin its characteristic reddish-brown tone, which can darken over time depending on circulation and storage conditions. In terms of mintage, the 1964 Australian penny was produced in large numbers, as demand for pennies remained high in everyday commerce. Millions were struck to ensure sufficient supply across the country, especially as Australia's population continued to grow during the post-war boom. Because of this high mintage, the 1964 penny is generally considered common in circulated condition. However, common does not mean unimportant, and the coin's historical placement near the end of the pre-decimal era gives it lasting significance. While circulated examples are easy to find, condition plays a major role in determining value. Most 1964 pennies were heavily used, resulting in wear, scratches, rim dents, and darkened surfaces. Coins found in very fine or extremely fine condition already stand out among surviving examples. Uncirculated specimens, especially those with original mint luster and minimal contact marks, are far scarcer and significantly more desirable to collectors. These higher-grade coins were often saved intentionally or stored away in rolls, forgotten until rediscovered decades later. Collectors pay close attention to surface quality, strike sharpness, and color when evaluating a 1964 penny. Coins with smooth fields, crisp details on the Queen's portrait, and a well-defined kangaroo on the reverse are especially sought after. Natural red or red-brown coloration is preferred over heavily darkened or artificially clean surfaces. Cleaning, polishing, or harsh handling can reduce a coin's value considerably, even if the date itself is common. Although the standard 1964 penny does not have famous major varieties like some earlier Australian pennies, collectors still examine these coins closely for minor die variations, striking differences, or mint errors. Off-center strikes, clipped planchets, die cracks, and double strikes can add interest and value, depending on severity and visibility. Such errors are rare but remind us that coin production, even in modern times, is not always perfect. The historical context of the 1964 penny adds another layer of fascination. Australia in the early 1960s was experiencing rapid economic growth, expanding suburbs, increased immigration, and a rising sense of national identity separate from Britain. Television was becoming common, the automotive industry was booming, and everyday life was changing quickly. Yet the penny remained a constant presence, linking modern Australians to generations before them who had used the same coin design for over 50 years. Just 2 years after the 1964 penny entered circulation, Australia adopted decimal currency on February 14, 1966, a day remembered as Decimal Day. Overnight, pounds, shillings, and pence disappeared from daily use, replaced by dollars and cents. Pennies like the 1964 issue were withdrawn from circulation and eventually demonetized, marking the end of an era. For many Australians, these coins became nostalgic keepsakes, reminders of childhood and simpler times. Today, the 1964 Australian penny holds a secure place in numismatic collections, especially among those interested in pre-decimal coinage or the reign of Queen Elizabeth II. While it may not command extremely high prices in average condition, its historical importance, classic design, and connection to a pivotal moment in Australian history ensures steady interest. For beginner collectors, it offers an affordable entry point into Australian numismatics, while advanced collectors seek high-grade examples to complete date sets. The coin also appeals to international collectors who appreciate Commonwealth coinage and the artistic consistency of mid-20th century designs. The combination of British monarch on one side and a distinctly Australian animal on the other reflects the dual identity of Australia during that period, balancing tradition with growing independence. This symbolism makes the 1964 penny more than just small change. It becomes a visual record of national evolution. In the modern market, prices for a 1964 Australian penny vary, depending on condition and eye appeal. Circulated examples typically sell for modest amounts, while uncirculated coins can command significantly higher prices, especially if professionally graded. Error coins or exceptional specimens may attract strong interest at auction. As always, market demand, collector trends, and overall condition play crucial roles in determining value. Beyond monetary worth, the true value of the 1964